meet afterwards, but if people bring in their things, they both have goals they've written down. We have the goals from before in the mission statement, and everyone could answer the question. We could do that. We can't do it in this meeting on the 18th because we're going to do boards and committees. So we are moving along on specific things that we need to do, and we do have things that we've asked staff to do. This past year has been just a whirlwind of activities for everyone concerned. And so I think that we're moving in the right direction with things, but we've been working on the details of it rather than the broad picture. So that's what we wanted to have, is something where we could work on it in a broader session.
Well, again, if you could look at that wheel of excellence,
right.
If you could look at every piece of that structure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to raise my hand because I didn't understand. I interrupted you.
I'm sorry.
John wants to.
I didn't want to interrupt Barry, though. I just wanted, before Louise adjourned, I wanted to mention something.
Okay, well, all I'm suggesting is look at all those pieces and ask yourself, to what degree are those in place, or to what degree are those missing? Okay. And whatever it takes for you to be collectively satisfied that we have articulated a vision, we have a powerful unified mission, our goals are clear and specific, our metrics and scoreboards and roadmaps to get there are in place. And again, some of the things that you're already doing are very much part of that. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct. John?
Just wanted to mention that, well, first of all, to thank Barry for coming down and spending time with us. We had some pretty limited criteria in which to work. The first was that we had to have a professional coach or facilitator, and we did. Thank you very much. The second was that we could not pay that person, and you agreed to do this for free. Thank you very much again, Barry. And the third was that we had 2 hours. And as we can all see, 2 hours is not going to cut it. So in an attempt to achieve clarity of a short-term vision, if you think, you as the governing body, that you can develop a vision with Mr. Demp's help, I think Mr. Demp should be compensated at some future point in time to work with us. He's talking about a series of meetings. And so my question to you is that, do you wish to pursue that course of action, or do you wish to try to have a facilitation meeting to develop a vision on your own? Assuming that Mr. Berry, who works for a living, would want to be compensated at some future point in time.
Councilwoman Kerwin?
I know that we need to have a session. I guess the session that we really need is one where we're able to talk. And I think synergy is built. It's interesting to do stuff at home in a silo, but that really isn't a shared vision. The synergy that needs to come through facilitation has to come organically from when we're together. I think the idea of doing it on a study session is good. A shortened meeting and then a 3-hour study session facilitated would be helpful. But that's the kind of facilitation that we're looking for, is a lot of us talking with a whiteboard, generating ideas, and seeing how that fits. And I think it has to come when we're together as a team.
But Mr. Zerleich's question is, do we want to do that as a group, but just by ourselves, or with staff first, and then if we felt that we needed Mr. Demp to come back, to engage him to come back with us, or do you think that we need to have him be with us at this first session?
Would you like me to walk out of the room?
No, it's okay. You're fine. You're fine. Dane, Councilman Slater?
It's just my suggestion. Having done this before, I think it is very important that you put your own ideas down. It's not so much working in a silo. Get your ideas, and you'd be very surprised when you come back and you put them on a board how close we're all going to be. I'd like to attempt to do it on our own. At least give it a shot and see how we do. We've been coached. I think if we pay attention to the coaching principles, I'd like to give it a shot and do it ourselves. And then if we can't, or we need assistance, maybe we can see how it goes. But I'd at least like to give it a shot doing it on our own.
Well, that's what I'd like. That's what I'd like to do.
You'd be surprised how close we are.
Mm-hmm. But I want everyone to express their opinion. So, what do you, Martin? You want to jump in?
Well, I just agree with Councilman Slater.
Okay. Councilman Beltramini?
I think that we use the techniques that Barry has given us, and if we commit to open-mindedness, trying it on, that I think we can make this work.
Okay.
Or at least, let me say, not create enough problems that it's not fixable. So I do think that we owe it to ourselves and our community to act like we know what we're doing and try and get this done.
Well, I think having the goal of working on this specific thing instead of other activities at which we've had to do, or sometimes we've had 2 or 3 items on a study session, we can focus in on this. I think that'd be good for all of us. Do you agree, Councilwoman McGinnis?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I'm really not looking at it as what could possibly happen if we all get in a room and talk about our goals. I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job this year when we're in that setting that we can do that.
Yes.
And we're not going to be able to be so specific that one person gets to sit there and dictate everything. I mean, we're going to have to go into it with an open mind where we're trying to put some things in place that will benefit the community as a whole. So I think if we use a lot of the things that you gave us today in terms of tools and even the way we ask questions and, you know, all of those things, I think that we'll be able to get far doing that. And I think we've got to at least give that a try before we commit to another financial obligation too.
And the reason why the goals that were set in previous years worked out is because then staff took those and worked on outcomes and outputs of things that they could achieve. And once you see those details, that clears up what the wording that was there that you thought was confusing to you. But it really made sense. But I think that that's good for us. Because we're in a special meeting,
Madam
we
Mayor?
have public comment at the end.
I
Yes.
have one more
Yes.
question to make sure that we all understand the assignment. Is it just to provide goals?
Well, goal and vision.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I think they go hand in hand.
But as we talked,
I know.
goals was the word used,
Right.
and so I wanted to make sure we're taking home the same assignment.
Okay, good. Councilman Sire?
I think objectives
Mhm.
also, goals and objectives.
If I may interrupt.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm going to invite you to consider is sometimes the word goal and the objectives are considered synonymous. What I would say, a goal is literally like a little future, and I would suggest a measurable result or a metric or scoreboard is more defined in terms of, you know, how do we measure progress against that. So a goal is a little future that articulates this is where we want to be in this small area. Here's how we keep track and measure that. And then you could also flesh out the action steps that you see different people taking. But, you know, sometimes when we use those terminologies, everybody looks at those words like, are they the same? Are they different? How do you? And we all have a different perspective on that.
I agree.
The other thing that I would encourage you to do is if you do some homework ahead of time, if you could each put together, let's say, a 2-page executive summary of what you're recommending, and actually are you able to provide those to each other before the meetings for review, for questions?
Well, we do it through the manager. We'd send it to him, and then he could provide it to the rest of us.
But you'd actually be able to review it and write it up and mark it up and have dialogue and do some work ahead of time. Because again, these processes.
No, I think what we should do for this first meeting is we're each going to do our own, and we're going to come together and talk about those, and then we can have each other's.
Well, there's a value of that. If you provided it to each other ahead of the meeting, you would stimulate other people's thinking,
Right.
and you'd be further down the road. And questions for clarification could be, developed prior to the meeting instead of seeing it for the very first time.
Mr. Zerl, did I see you signaling you wanted to talk about objectives?
Well, I just wanted to ask Barry just a clarification question as an example as well. Would you say that enhancing the transportation network is a goal, and then widening Rochester Road is an objective?
Well, if you said to have a transportation system that does da-da-da, and then you would simply get very specific of what would happen, by when it would happen, and how you would know it would happen. So that would be the difference between a goal statement and a measurable result. Okay,
But what happens is we set the goals and then staff does the how it's going to happen.
Well, actually, I think you as a group need to create goals and scoreboards or some form of metrics together. Again, this is interesting where you have council and you have staff in some ways coming together and actually having these conversations collectively to say, what is the goal, and do we know what you mean by that goal, and how would we measure progress against the goal? Because you can create a goal and he can interpret the metrics for that completely different than you might. So,
Yeah, but then we have to agree to it. I mean, it's not like it's done in isolation. Councilwoman Kerwin? Oh,
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, I think there are a couple of questions about the Open Meetings Act. If
Right.
you do choose to go through the city manager's department and have, you know, again, he can compile them, but if you do choose to do that, I just want to make sure everyone is aware that it is a public document and it would be subject to release and
Right.
So, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any others before we go to?
There are some other things, we had talked about, again, something to think about. I'm not in favor of sending things out ahead of time, because one thing is a trust issue. And that's something that we didn't talk about in here, but it came through with our team building before. So I think in terms of council coming up with vision and mission and goals, and we could think about strategies to achieve them, I think it's also important to talk about ourselves and in trying to get better at what we do. And in addition to having trust as a team, there's trust in the community. And I'd ask my colleagues to look at ways that we can build trust and perhaps address one of the goals to address that issue, which has become, okay.
All right.
And to go to trust, that's why I say if I spent my time doing 2 pages and then it ended up being blasted out there as, you know, in a letter to the editor before we even had a time to talk about it, that's one of the ways that explodes before we have an opportunity to fully form, as a body, deliberate and come to an understanding about some of these things. So in a business world, that may work well, but I think for us to think carefully and then come back and try to generate things together, I think that might be the better way to go.
Well, also too, because sometimes ideas are generated in an open-ended fashion, but they don't come to fruition. As a group, someone may have an idea, but the group decides that they want to go a certain way. And so sometimes ideas get shifted out or shifted in. So we need to realize that too. Okay, I'm sorry to rush people, but I do have to provide time for public comment and have a break before we go to our other meeting. So I'm going to turn to the audience now, if it's okay with council, and ask if anyone would like to say anything, and we have the microphone here, and please give us your name.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Bernardi. How are you? I read an article just recently, and I can't remember now where it was, but it actually talked about mission statements, and it said that people today, when they can't put their, I'm paraphrasing, but people today, when they can't put food on their table, they're in fear of losing their job, or they've lost their job, they're losing their homes, they don't care about mission statements. And, you know, that really rang true to me. And and I don't mean to rain in the parade here, but the article went on to say what the public cares about is what you do. And I just like to bring it more to and thank you, Mr. Demp, for doing that. I saw you do this in this community, in this meeting, is bring it down home to today's world and talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's the piece that's missing. Today, we're talking about people in this community torn apart because we're losing things that are so dear to our heart. All of us, just so dear to our hearts. It's like our hearts are being ripped out of our chest. All of us on both sides, everyone. Talk about consensus. That it holds for all groups, all the people who are trying to do something. And, in that context, Mary Kerwin, Ms. Councilwoman Kerwin wants exciting and imaginative and creative and wonderful goals. You know what? It ain't going to happen. People are on a survival mode, as Mr. Dem pointed out. And I think it's time that this council started to come into the real world and understand that that is what is happening. And I'm glad that you did not decide to spend money on this furthering, for mission statements and so on. When people can't eat, they can't eat the mission statement. Okay, and we can't keep the library open if there's a mission statement. And we've got people in this community, both sides, working so hard day after day. I haven't been able to join them this time because I've been extremely ill. This is my first day up. But I must tell you that I've been watching and I've been hearing, and both sides in this community are working their hearts out. And then to see people sitting around talking about exciting and imaginative and creative mission statements. You know, this is not the time. And also, I just wanted to point out another thing. The CCPTF task force had a vision for the community center, for the Civic Center. One little piece of that is in evidence on Livernois Road. Every time I pass there, I look at that, and I just feel something happens to me. I just feel so good to see one little piece of that came out. One little piece. But you know what? The whole area could have been developed in heyday. But I tell you that tonight it's not even on the table. It was ignored, it was shelved, and it was a beautiful piece of work. And it was done by the citizens in this community. That's who did that. There was no cost to it. It was free of charge. It was from our love of this city that came onto this table and was developed. But I've heard people criticize it as just a bunch of pretty pictures, Mr. Miller. It has been just thrown aside. And you know, when you look at that little piece on Livernois, you know that there was beauty in that. There was wonder in that. There was magic in that. You want imagination, then it's what you do, not what you say sitting around a table like this. Okay.
Allow for Mrs. Tobacco if she wishes to speak.
I just wanted to ask, too, that you should be focusing on the public and not, you know, the public is hurting. And I heard one person tonight talk about that your goal should be talking about looking at how do you relate to the public, not just how you relate to one another, but how do you relate to the public instead of threatening to sue them if they don't agree with you or criticizing them or whatever, or saying we don't need to televise meetings, Mr. Zerline. This is not how you build trust in the community. Thank you.
Mrs. Tobacco, did you wish to speak? Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, then we'll be in adjournment, and we will be in the next meeting at 7:30.